Started here. Thank you everyone so much for joining this really important conversation this week. And if I see all folks are already talking in the comments and the question boxes, so if you want to just send your questions, we'll try to include those in the show. And with that, I will turn it over to Mayor Pete.
All right, well, a big thank you to everybody who's joining tonight, and I think it's a really important moment for our Win the Era community to come together. And I see in the chat folks joining from all over the country, and I'm so thankful for that, because this really is one of those times when we've got to pull together. Friday we got the tragic news that our country has lost one of its greatest titans of justice through our entire history as a nation. And I think for all of us, it was a moment to reflect not just on how extraordinary Ruth Bader Ginsburg was, and what her leadership, her advocacy, even just her personal example meant, as well, of course, as her extraordinary record of jurisprudence on the Supreme Court bench, but also to think about how all of us relate to the law. I know this is very personal for Chasten and me, and as you can see, Chasten's in the one of our favorite Zoom backdrops, the kitchen. I'm on the road for some campaign work, but we wanted to take time together with all of you to talk about why it's personal for us and why it's personal for you. Our marriage, the most important thing in our lives, is directly connected to what goes on in that Supreme Court. Matter of fact, it was a margin of one vote. It was the fact that it was Justice Ginsburg and not somebody else in that seat, perhaps, that makes it possible for our family, our household, our lives as we know it, to exist. And whether we're talking about that, whether we're talking about healthcare, whether we're talking about our democracy itself, we know what the stakes are. Even in the context of the pandemic, I often said that it's unbelievable, yet always true, that the stakes can always go higher. Didn't seem like they could have gone higher than they were when I was running for president, and then they did. And they have again and again and again. And that's true yet once more right now. And I know that if you're part of this Win the Era community, you're already so motivated to be part of the solution. And it's a good moment to think in terms of eras and not just in terms of elections, and remember how those two relate to each other. In other words, the election that's coming up, I won't even say coming up, the election that's underway, because some of you are in states where voting has already begun. That is defining in a way that's going to reverberate through the years, and I believe through the decades to come. The good news is that we have a lot of power in our hands too. Sometimes you can feel powerless as you watch the bad faith of the Senate GOP, as you watch what goes on in official Washington. But what I'm trying to remind myself and everybody else of too is that actually all of our moment of greatest power as citizens comes when we have that chance to fill in that ballot. And we're so fortunate to have one of America's leading legal voices for justice join us as well for a conversation that I know I'm really excited for. To be with Robbie Kaplan any day would be extraordinary, but today you may have seen the news about her work, and just this week as we're thinking about the court, could be more important, and Chasten will introduce her in a moment. But let me take a moment to introduce Chasten, who I don't get to be sitting next to today. But Love, I know you've been thinking about this ever since you came into the kitchen and let me know the news about Justice Ginsburg, and I wonder how you've been reflecting on that, and how all of this has been turning over in your mind and your heart these last hours.
Yeah, well, it's good to see you. I hope you're having a good day. I remember when I saw the push notification on the phone, how much of a punch to the gut it felt like. I remember in 2015 when we won the right to marry, feeling like it was such a great bit of progress, but maybe I would never see it. That maybe I would never find it in my life. And then I found you. And to think about this thing that is so personal, so special. It's the most special thing I have in my life. the idea that that could be ripped away from us is terrifying. I remember running down the stairs to find you in the kitchen. Just coming into the room and seeing your husband sitting there at the table, a husband that you never thought you'd get, a husband that you never thought you might be legally married to, and just feeling like, I think my first question was, they can't take it away, can they? This is what this election is all about. It's not just Joe Biden. It's not just the presidency. It's the Supreme Court. It's justices all across this country. And it's so personal. And so I'm so glad that you and I get to spend some time with Robbie tonight, someone who, I didn't even know I had people like you in my life, Robbie, fighting for me. And now here we are. I'm playing with this ring right now because I cherish it so much. So for all of you on the call who don't know Robbie, Robbie has received numerous awards and recognitions for her groundbreaking legal work. She's a published author, and best of all, she's a staunch ally. Robbie is perhaps best known for successfully arguing before the United States Supreme Court on behalf of her client, Edie Windsor, in United States versus Windsor, the landmark Supreme Court case. In Windsor, the Supreme Court ruled that a key provision of the Defense of Marriage Act, otherwise known as DOMA, violated the US Constitution by barring legally married same-sex couples from enjoying the wide-ranging benefits of marriage conferred under federal law. The consequences of the Windsor decision were both rapid and profound. And we are all, Robbie, so grateful for all of your hard work in helping move progress forward. I know you are also currently serving as a professor at Columbia Law School, and we are so grateful that you chose to spend some time with Peter and I and the rest of the community tonight. So Robbie, welcome. And just make sure you unmute.
Yeah, I was going to say, I just betrayed the fact that I'm like eons older than both of you. Thank you so much to both of you for having me here. Should I start? Should I start the conversation?
Yeah, let's jump in.
So I keep thinking back as you guys were talking about where you were on Friday night. I was, for Jews the world over, it was the beginning of Rosh Hashanah. And I try very hard, sometimes successfully, sometimes not successfully, not to be on my devices during the Jewish holidays. But just as I was going over already to celebrate this very odd holiday, since we were all doing it on Zoom and we couldn't be together to pray with our communities, I happened to look, probably wrongly, but I happened to look at my phone and I saw the news. And, obviously, like many of us, tears came to my eyes. But folks may or may not know this, but in the Jewish tradition, when someone, it is taught, the rabbis taught, that when someone dies on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, on Erev Rosh Hashanah, that means that the person is a tzaddik, or someone who is a just and righteous person. The thinking is because God let that person live through the entire last year, up to the very precipice of the new year, and it's a sign of great honor. So I keep thinking to myself, what is the universe or God or whatever you call it, what is it trying to tell us at this very, very troubling time, given when Justice Ginsburg died? What does that mean? And I think the only lesson that we can draw from it, we already heard, is to live our lives the way she did. Which means to work so hard all the time to achieve the promise of the Constitution, to obtain equality for everyone in this country. And it's obviously crystal clear that the way to do that, at least right now, is to get every single possible human being to the polls to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as we possibly can. It's hard to think of a momentous time in history, much less in my lifetime in US history than the times that we're living through right now. And part of me thinks Justice Ginsburg is looking down on us and maybe somewhere understands that this was the last kick we needed to make sure that we win this election and to assure the promise of the Constitution for everyone.
Well said. And you know, I think in that it gives us kind of marching orders too, right? Because there's that sense of, I think there's a sense of powerlessness just knowing that we lost such an important voice who was securing our rights and our safety as a democracy, and certainly as an LGBTQ community, and knowing what she meant for the rights and advancement of the equality of women. And yet there is something we can do. And I love that you have let us know. You know, Chasten and I are not lawyers, so we don't get to
you just play one on TV.
That's right. Yeah. So we don't have the tools that you do, and we know you get to bring that toolkit. But all of us who can vote, there's so much power in that.
Well, I see we're getting a ton of questions for both of you, Robbie and Pete. A lot of these questions are sort of rooted in anxiety and fear. A lot of people are concerned about what they can do to help win the election, besides calling or texting or donating. Robbie, a lot of people are asking about what the future of the Supreme Court might look like and what our options are should Donald Trump get his way with his Supreme Court nominee. So Pete, maybe if you want to first talk to what people can do in this moment, and then Robbie, if you could maybe help us kind of understand what the future of the Supreme Court looks like.
Yeah, I'll be brief because I'm really eager to hear Robbie's take from her position of expertise in the legal world. I'll tell you from my perspective, I'm thinking of it, of course, mainly in terms of the elections. I mean, first of all, we've got to fight for the idea that remember that Justice Ginsburg's last wish that she expressed was that she not be replaced until the president has been inaugurated and installed. And you know, this isn't just about an election coming up. Again, it's an election underway. I mean, some people have already voted. And so I think most Americans recognize that. And we need to keep pushing and keep fighting. Now, of course, this is likely to go straight to the Senate. And so we've got to be pressuring senators and making sure that any senators, especially those who are up for re-election right now, hear that message about what we expect. But in the end, you know, this is more than anything about thinking about the future and what we have to do right now, why it is so imperative that we retake the Senate, why it is imperative that we retake the White House. And we know exactly what we've got to do there. Other than that, to say that there are some people, I think, still who view the world the way we do, have the same things on the line that we do, but don't believe that it's worth the trouble of voting, or don't believe that a vote matters. And we've got to make sure that anybody who's deciding whether to vote knows how much power is in their hands. But Robbie, would love to know how it looks from your perspective.
Yeah, so let me begin by saying I really can't overemphasize. There's a school of legal thought called legal realism, which means that who the judges are and what their life experiences were and how they got to the place where they are, it has a huge impact on their decision making. And I adhere to that theory. I just think that you really can't overemphasize, even though judges, of course, follow the law and are bound to do that and do it most of the time, you really can't overemphasize the significance of the actual personalities in the room, making the decisions, conferencing the cases, at oral arguments, in terms of just what a momentous impact that can have on how the cases came out. Let me give you an example from Windsor. In Windsor, not during my argument, Justice Ginsburg didn't ask me a single question, but during the argument of my adversary, Paul Clement, who's one of the best Supreme Court advocates of my generation for sure, if not the best. He was making the support, the defense of DOMA actually sound rational. Only Paul could probably achieve that. And Justice Ginsburg kind of interrupted him, and she said, well, wait a second. She said, marriage affects, it reminds me of what you were saying before, Chasten, marriage affects every aspect of life. It goes from health to taxes, to how you raise your children, to how you die and what happens when you die. It's every aspect of your life, isn't it, Mr. Clement? Of course, he had to say yes. And she said, well, the problem here is that the marriages that gay people like Edie Windsor had to have prior to our winning the case were not real marriages. They were, she used the phrase, skim milk marriages. You know, straight people have whole milk marriages and gay people have skim milk marriages. And in those 3 words, first of all, the minute those words came out of her mouth, I knew we would win the case. There was kind of laughter in the Supreme Court courtroom, but it was a kind of laughter of both relief, I think, and of kind of a lightning going off in people's heads. And with those 3 words, she managed to express the essential point of our case better than we had in our briefs. And I had Pam Carlin on the briefs with me, so we had quite a team, and better than anyone else in any of the other briefs had said it. After the argument, I spoke to her and she said to me that people had told her, I think it was, I think she was referring to her son, but people had told her that it was the best thing she ever said on the bench. And it likely would be the best thing she ever said on the bench. She didn't say whether she agreed with that, but she didn't say whether that she disagreed with it. And even though she didn't write the decision, even though Justice Kennedy wrote the decision, that mental clarity by using the phrase skim milk marriage had a momentous impact, I believe, on the outcome of the case and ultimately on Obergefell 2 years later. So who the people are who sit in those seats, who the people are who know to make comments like that when it's necessary to make them, is absolutely crucial, particularly in cases like gay rights cases, like voting rights cases, like civil rights cases, where they're so personal, where they're so controversial, they're so personal. We need judges like Justice Ginsburg with her character and her experience to be sitting up on that bench.
I love that. I love that phrase. I never knew that. I'm going to start using that. I'm going to say you did a skim milk job on the dishes. So Robbie, there's obviously right now a lot of fear and worry in our community. And like I mentioned when I came into the kitchen to tell Pete the news, a lot of people in the questions are asking, is there a precedent in this case, or is it actually possible that we could lose our marriages?
So honestly, even if the worst of all possible scenarios happens, and I don't want to go there because I don't think it will, and I think we can all fight to make sure it doesn't, but even if we're in the worst of all possible scenarios, God forbid, Donald Trump wins or cheats or somehow continues as president and he appoints a justice of the Supreme Court. I don't think, honestly, that we are in the danger of losing our rights to marriage. I think we saw in the decision this year under Title VII that even Chief Justice Roberts joined the majority in holding that Title VII covers gay people and trans people, which was actually astounding to me. But what we do have to fear, and it's not an insignificant fear, is that this court, and particularly the nominee Coney Barrett, is a strong adherent of this view, believes that the separation between church and church and state in our country has gone too far. In fact, I would argue that they believe that there shouldn't really be a separation between church and state. And the church that they have in mind is a very right-wing conservative view of Christianity. And they believe and will enforce in court decisions that anyone, from public officials to people who work in stores, to employers, to anyone else, anyone who has a religious objection to the fact that you are married to Mayor Pete or that I'm married to my wife, will be able to avoid the otherwise neutral principles of law that say you can't discriminate against us based on that religious objection. That is their goal. They have said it many, many times, and they are getting closer and closer to achieving it.
So P, I feel like, thank you, Robbie, for the answer. P, I feel like that might still cause a little gut punch to some people, like the idea that maybe they won't, try to strip us of that right immediately. But they could continue stripping us of individual rights. How do we make sure that we're connecting that message, that it is not just about Joe Biden, but it is about extremely personal, specific things like this? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so much as we always talk about is connecting up to our everyday lives, right? This is why politics matters. This is why law matters, and that's why that anecdote, Robbie, that you shared from the justice is so apt to the moment we're in, right? We're talking about our healthcare. We're talking about right to choose, and we're talking about things that affect people in the most intimate and everyday ways. And I think, there's always this kind of coverage of politics as sport. Politics is kind of who's up, who's down. I think the closer you get to an election, the more that kind of becomes part of the coverage. And then you add in the kind of showmanship that's really central to how this president obviously treats the office and the role. And it's just so clear that we've got to push back by making clear what the stakes are like for us. Now I'm thinking about your mom, Chasten, and what's on the line there in terms of healthcare coming before the court in a matter of weeks. And maybe you can share a little bit how you talked about that on the trail, because I think it's important for us to be thinking about a moment like this too.
Yeah, I have so many questions for Robbie, but I put out this Twitter thread today, and it sort of kind of proves that, social media and sort of our media ecosystem in general sort of deals in absolutes, right? Like you either this or that, this exists, this doesn't. And I just ask that people start having the talk, that there are people in their lives who will literally only switch to voting for Biden if somebody they love or trust asks them. That Project Lincoln is not going to save us. A sassy tweet is not going to be the thing that moves them. Your neighbor's yard sign is not going to be the thing that moves them. It is going to be you calling and saying empathetically and honestly and kindly. You can't just call up your uncle and say, like, Uncle Jim, you're a racist and a homophobe and you should be ashamed of yourself, because then you say, well, screw you, I'm voting for Trump, right? And hang up the phone. You have to come to that conversation wanting to help somebody extend a hand and bring them to the right side of history. And when I'm talking to people, talking about mom's healthcare and her cancer and the importance of the Affordable Care Act, I obviously talk about our marriage. I talk about what lockdown drills do to my students in my classroom. But you have to have those conversations. We only got 40 some days left. And I know there are people who have family members or neighbors or friends who will probably vote for this president, but might reconsider if someone they love helps them understand why they are so afraid and what they stand to lose. Because there are also many people of privilege and comfort in this country who have never had to consider life might be different for other people. And we have to help them understand what that's like. Robbie, a lot of questions very specific to the restructuring of the Supreme Court. Pete, obviously you were out front in the primary talking about the need to restructure the Supreme Court. Robbie, do you have any ideas, or are you noodling on anything, or have you read anything that's interesting about not politicizing the court, not just so the Democrats can steal back power, but how we actually get to a moment where the court is less political?
Look, I never thought, because of what I do, I've been very much of an institutionalist, and Justice Ginsburg herself was an institutionalist, and I've been very reluctant to adopt or to agree to adopt any kind of significant changes to the court. But given the recent past, we'll see what happens. But if they manage to get a justice on either before election or right after the election, if he's a lame duck, that sends a signal that the court, frankly, or that the structure of the court is already broken. And if that's true, that's a very dangerous position for this country and for this democracy to be in. And we need to put in place a system that restores public confidence in the integrity of the court and in the apolitical decision-making of the court. And between Merrick Garland and then the Kavanaugh hearings and then this, it's almost like 3 strikes you're out. I think we will need to do something. There's smarter minds than mine, including Mayor Pete's, I know, have ideas. I guess I'd to say I'm open-minded to all of them, but we need a Supreme Court that people respect, and we cannot see the Supreme Court as some kind of partisan, battle, like a battle between Fox and MSNBC, which is how people are going to perceive it if this continues.
I'm curious with that in the background and knowing there may be deep reform questions in the future. What are you thinking about just in terms of legal strategy now that we are looking at a court without Justice Ginsburg, and of course just a federal judiciary that's really been shaped in many ways by this president? I mean, you've led on so many cases involving the rights of women, so many cases for the LGBTQ community, for the things we care about. Where do we go from here in terms of just legal strategy, and what are the biggest battles you think we should anticipate coming around the corner?
So the big battles are, as I said, I mean, for gay people and for women and a whole bunch of people, what religious freedom means, and whether religious freedom under our Constitution means it gives rights to people to violate the law in supposed adherence to their religion. That's going to be probably the single biggest issue before this court in the next several years. In addition to that, voting rights, the right to choice. My friend Dahlia Lithwick was absolutely right. That the decision that they made this last term was razor thin. And it's very clear that their justices are looking for a case to reconsider Roe. And they may get one very, very soon. So voting rights, reproductive freedom, civil rights. The Voting Rights Act in Shelby County was eviscerated. That's part of the reason why we have to fight so hard to get such bigger margins, because we don't have free and fair elections today. Those are all going to be issues for this court. And in terms of strategy, honestly, right now, I never thought I'd say this, but the swing went from being Kennedy to Chief Justice Roberts. And it was Chief Justice Roberts last term who in 4 or 5 decisions really kept us from falling over the precipice. I assume Chief Justice Roberts' views on the Constitution and mine are very different, but I do believe he respects the institution and wants to preserve the institution. And we're going to have to use his respect and love for the institution in every way we possibly can to try to forge alliances and to keep the court in the center rather than having it veer off a cliff.
Yeah.
In terms of the lower courts, because of what Trump's done, frankly, it's even truer today than it's always been, where you choose to sue and in what court you choose to bring a lawsuit is more important than ever, because there are courts right now where you could get a draw of a judge who will just do things that are crazy because they're one of these Trump appointees who frankly isn't even very experienced at being a lawyer.
Oof. It's a shame we're not drinking. I do want to break a little bit of the doom and gloom here for a second. And while we're celebrating, while we're worried about things that we could lose, we're also talking about something we cherish. And so Robbie and Pete, I'm wondering, and this feels sort of, cheeky coming from me, so I'll return the favor, but what is one thing you love about being married to your spouse? Just the institution of marriage, not just something you love about your spouse. What do you love about being married?
Well, all the many reasons I love you, and everybody, I think on this call hopefully has had a chance to fall in love with Chasten the way that I have. But it does matter in so many ways for our lives, right? That love is validated and is official in the eyes of the law. I mean, all the way down to, doing our taxes and just I'm thinking about what it was like when my father became very ill, and the fact that I could say that, my husband's here at the hospital and he needs to be let in because he's part of the family. These things that, I think about how we're standing on the shoulders of people who didn't have that, or they had it in a tenuous way, like Edie Windsor, that might have been married in one definition and not protected in another. But yeah, I think it's a great question, Love, and I'm eager to hear Robbie's answer.
So let me just say, you used the phrase, Mayor Pete, standing on the shoulders, and every single woman in America, and certainly any woman who's a professional and a lawyer and living and doing a job outside of being a housewife, every single woman is standing on the shoulders of Justice Ginsburg. My entire life and career would have been impossible without the work that she did as a litigator, litigating for the rights of women before the court for the ACLU Women's Rights Project. It's almost inconceivable to think of today. But my life, forget the gay stuff, my life as a woman would have been completely impossible without her. Let me tell a story about it, because I have a really great story about her. So it's 2013. We had won the Windsor case, and my wife and I got invited to the White House Hanukkah party. And our son, who was then 6 or 7, and has ADHD, and he's much older now, and it's much more under control. At that age, not so much. And we kind of had a debate, the way spouses do, about whether we should bring our son to the Hanukkah party. And we kind of went back and forth. And I thought to myself, God knows, I may never get invited back to the White House. God, was I right about that? As long as I live. I was like, I want to bring him. He'd be able to tell his children and his children's children that he was at the Obama White House for the Hanukkah party. So I went up to my son and I said, listen, his name is Jacob. I said, listen, Jacob, I'm going to make a deal with you. I said, the minute it gets to be too much, I promise you we will leave. So we got dressed up. We put him in a suit, in a tie, I think, in a jacket, and went over to the White House. And he was great for about the first hour and a half. And then it did start to get super crowded. And he invoked my promise. And I said, okay, I made a deal with you. We'll go. And as we were walking out, we kind of were walking out the way people come in. As we were walking out, Justice Ginsburg was coming in. And in violation of my contract, which is always a mistake, I said, hey, Jacob, let's go over and say hello to Justice Ginsburg. We walked over to her, and I am not exaggerating about this at all. He literally had a temper tantrum. But what's even worse than that is where he had it. It was literally on top of her shoes. She had like Ferragamos, I think, on, and my son was having a tantrum on top of the buckles of her Ferragamos. And so I had this look on my face. My wife and I are standing there, and I had this look on my face like, if there was anyone else in the world I would rather have this happen to, it would be them, including President Obama. Like, that was, Justice Ginsburg was pretty much the last human being on the planet I would want this to happen to. And so I had this distraught look on my face, and I said, Justice, I'm so sorry. And she looked at me and she said, listen, she said, I have a son who's exactly your age, which is true. And she said, when he was a child, he was a lot like that. She said, his child was a trial. She said, but he's now great. He's a professor at University of Chicago. He's got a wife and kids, and not to worry, it will all be fine. The reason I want to tell the story is because, first of all, everyone knows that Justice Ginsburg was smart. She's one of the smartest people on the planet, but she was equally as kind as she was smart. And also she understood the value of families and marriages and children. And she didn't think of Rachel and Jacob and I any differently than any other family at the White House that night. A few months later, I was doing a moot court and she was one of the judges. And I went up to her afterwards and I said, Justice Ginsburg, I just want to tell you that was such a kind thing, that you said to me. And she looked at me and she's like, oh, she's like, his childhood was such a trial. So she understood, and I think we all understand that. And that's what it's about, right? It's about understanding that her marriage with Marty and her kids was no different than our marriages. And she got that, to use a Jewish expression, in her gut, in her kishkas. And that's what enabled her to do what she did with her life.
What a great story. And what a great reminder that it's not always about the arcane, finer points about what the law entails. Of course, she was a master of that, as you are, and great lawyers and jurists are. But the whole point of the law is to make our lives go better and to be in touch with what makes life go well and what threatens that is so central to all of this. I know we're running tight on time, but I'd love to know, Robbie. Edie Windsor was such a fighter and stood for our community in so many ways. I wonder what you think she would have to say about like this, and what we could be doing to really live, to do right by her and to honor her.
I am almost certain that if Edie Windsor, God willing, were still alive today, I would be having fights with her every single hour of every single day, because she would want to go out on the streets, hopefully with a mask, and try to persuade people to vote. And I would be telling her, Edie, you're in your 80s, be careful. Maybe that's not such a good idea. But there's no question that she would be walking those streets and traveling like a crazy person and doing everything she could do to persuade every single LGBTQ person in the United States of America to vote in this election. If I'd be fighting with her about it, she would have been right, because normally she was right.
Well, we're so thankful that we were able to take this time together. Thanks for joining us. I think if folks on this call hadn't already heard about your leadership, now they understand why we're so glad that you're out there fighting for us and reading a lot about you in the paper and about your work on many fronts. So thanks for everything that you're doing. And Chasten and I both are just such fans and just look forward to having a lot to celebrate in the future, even if it might be a long and winding road between us and there. But we know when we get there, the work that you've done. So thanks so much.
Right back at you guys.
Thank you, Robbie. I do just want to say that there have been some people in the comments just talking about how it feels to be LGBTQ or queer and have your family either turn your back on you or Trump over you. And many of us aren't strangers to that feeling. But I do just want to say there are a lot of you on the call. And if you're feeling that you have lost family, there are 3 people on this call right now who love you just the way you are. And I know you can feel isolated and alone, but literally stood in the biggest halls of justice in this country and have fought for you because she too sees you and loves you just the way you are, believes you're worthy of everything. So I know it can be a scary time, but Robbie, thank you for helping inspire people and helping people feel seen and a little bit safer and more understood. Peter and I are just grateful for everything that you've done.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Chasten,
thank
God
you.
willing.
God willing, and we'll make it happen. Chasten, I'll see you when I get home. And everyone on this call, thank you. Look, I know the challenge only mounts, but remember the power that's in our hands. I mean, this community of supporters is a powerful thing. And what we have done to lift each other up and what you are doing right now in countless ways to reach out to voters, to mobilize the financial support that we need, to leave no vote on the table, to make sure that loved ones who, as Chasten said, may or may not respond to an ad, but they'll respond to you when you tell them what's on the line. This is how we're going to change things. I'm still convinced that, each passing day, 2020 has more explaining to do as years go for what it has done. It's not been a good year, but it's not over. And the most important chapter of the story of 2020 and what it meant in American history is yet to be written. We're writing it right now, and you're in the middle of that. So let's continue to do everything that we know how to support the candidates we believe in, to fight for the causes that we stand for, so that we do actually, even though it's hard to think of it right now, in the future, feel good when we look back at 2020, because we know the change that began right here. That's what you're part of, and I can't thank you enough. Stay close, stay connected, stay involved, and let's give ourselves a lot to celebrate by the end of this year. Take care, everyone.